Marlins are going for a UK-friendly noon start for those watching in Florida on Eastern Time. But can the Marlins finally get a sweep done all over to Brian Hoeing today? Ryan Schlesinger joins me on Locked On Marlins today to preview this game, but also look back on an absolute wild game in yesterday's evening game, all on today's show.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins. This, of course, is your daily Marlins podcast, and it is a Sunday. It's a bonus episode on a Sunday, but there is a sweep opportunity, so it felt like a great time for a podcast. You are listening to the pod. Hit subscribe, of course, as you know. It's available free and everywhere, and it is your team every day. There is a YouTube channel. Head over to there and hit subscribe also. And if you're an everydayer, leave a comment. Let me know you are listening. Appreciate it. I, of course, am your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up on Twitter at Miami Marlins UK. This episode is sponsored by Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And as mentioned, Ryan Schlesinger is in the house. Ryan, how we doing, brother?
Doing good. I'm ready to discuss some Marlins baseball. Two good wins, 2 one-run wins, a walk-off win, and then a save for Tanner Scott. I was at the game yesterday, and I'll be listening from home today because I'm not going to pay for Peacock just to watch one game. But I'll be listening to Kyle Seeloff on the radio today, and I'm ready to try and get the first sweep of the season. We've had opportunities. We have not completed it. Let's complete our first sweep today.
Yeah, how confident are you feeling with Brian Hoeing going on the mound for the Marlins?
Well, I could feel somewhat confident in some games against the Cubs. They haven't been too great against us. Stroman had a good outing against us on Friday. And then that guy for the Cubs yesterday who was making his debut, Killian, he was not good.
No.
And he had 5 runs in the first inning. That was just crazy. And some people were like, he's throwing at their head. Get him out of here. He's going to kill some players. But anyways, today we're facing Steele for the Cubs, and he has a 4-0 record, 29 strikeouts, and a 1.19 ERA. So Justin Steele has been great, the 27-year-old lefty for the Cubs. It's going to be interesting to see what the Marlins can do against him and try and hand him his first loss of the season. I'm not a big loss guy. Wins, loss, doesn't really matter to me. I think it's kind of an old stat, but it is interesting that he has not been credited for a loss this season, and hopefully we can give him his first today, and hopefully the Marlins can complete this sweep, and hopefully Hoeing could prove that he can do something after the start against the Braves. He had a couple good innings, but overall it was not great.
Yeah, tough ask for Braves, and to be honest with you, it's a tough ask again against the Cubs. The Cubs offense has been one of the better offenses in Major League Baseball. So for Brian Hoeing, it's some big tests. But, there's an opportunity there for Hoeing. We're uncertain about Johnny Cueto's status. We're uncertain about Trevor Rogers' status. We need Brian Hoeing to step up. And really, the way things have been going in the past, 10 days or so, we need some depth out of Brian Hoeing. The bullpen last night was asked to do a lot. Obviously, Floro and Puck were down. We'll talk about the way the game ended a bit later on. But really, for me, for Brian Hoeing, it's all about, can he just give some length and get deep into the game? 5 or more innings, I think, would be ideal. And obviously, if they can keep themselves in the game, even better. But yeah, for me, that's the main thing I'm looking at from Hoeing is just how deep he can go into the game. Tough assignment for him. But yesterday's game, boy, oh boy, it was a funky one, as you mentioned. Both started in the early going. It felt like the Marlins could, put up a 10 spot, to be honest with you, that first inning. The pitcher just completely lost it. So you were there at the ballpark. Firstly, a lot of Cubbies in the ballpark last night, which I guess kind of added to it, right? Because it was a kind of back and forth game. So in many ways, you'd love to just hear, home fans, and that's all you could hear. But actually having 2 sets of quite vocal fans, both in the same ballpark, probably create quite a nice atmosphere, I'd say.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. I mean, I'd say probably 70 to 80% of the fans there, at least in my section, were
Mm,
Cubs fans. I was sitting near the right field foul pole. And yeah, there were a ton of Cubs fans, but it felt crazy because there were a lot of times when the Cubs fans, they got loud, they were on their feet for the pitch, and then something would happen. And usually it didn't go their way when they had runners on, and,
mm,
they'd put their hands on their head, especially when they hit that fly ball to deep left field. And I thought that could have gone out. It was with the bases loaded, a chance to tie the game with a grand slam. And De La Cruz caught it at the warning track. And then they ended up doubling up the runner over at second, Eric Hosmer,
mm.
to get the out in between second and third to end the inning after what could have possibly lost the game for the Marlins, or at least put the Cubs right back in it. And they only ended up scoring one run on that.
Yeah,
But
big play.
yeah, it was crazy. And I'd like some more Marlins fans to come out, but at the same time, there were some Marlins fans, and it was fun to see the Cubs fans get silenced after the Marlins do something to get themselves out of a really scary situation.
Yeah. It's going to be really intriguing, right? Because the Marlins, they had a real tough schedule to open up. They've started well, in my opinion. They've probably overperformed, in all honesty. A couple of games over 500 with who they've had to play. If you take out the NL East series, they've won every other series. So they're playing good ball. The Heat are obviously the talk of the town right now. The Panthers as well. So it's going to be interesting, right? Where as those sports start to tail off, are the Marlins going to be genuinely in the hunt, playing fun baseball? And is there going to be an influx maybe of fans back to the ballpark? I don't, maybe, they're not going to be packing it out through the week, but I'm really intrigued to see if this Marlins team and the way they're playing the game can actually, just catch everyone's attention and think, hey, I'm going to go down. I know, tickets are cheap, and, it isn't the most expensive ballpark to go to. So hopefully you get their wish there out more with home fans. But talk to me about Edward Cabrera yesterday, because we've been waiting for Eddie. And I wouldn't say it was everything was clicking. The walks were still there, and he walked himself into a big jam in the second inning. But, for me, the 12 strikeouts, a career strikeout day, but, by some, actually, I think his previous high was 9. So to get 12 on the day, Edward Cabrera, the Marlins really need him to find his groove. And I think this just shows what is there, what talent is there for Edward Cabrera. If he could just find this command, if he could just have the confidence to throw strikes, there's another level or two I think Edward Cabrera could go up to, though, right?
Yeah, and, it kind of felt weird, though, because there were still 5 walks. There were a lot of times where there were 2 innings, especially, where he was in a big jam, and somehow he got out of it when there was runners in scoring position. So it could have been a lot worse for Edward Cabrera. It could have been better without the walks, though. It was a very interesting start, I think, but he only ended up giving up 2 earned runs, and both of those runs coming on that Patrick Wisdom shot, which was his 10th home run of the season. That was a bomb to left center field. And it's kind of crazy, too, that Patrick Wisdom, who doesn't really get talked about too much, he's not talked about as an elite player or a high-quality player, at least from a non-Cubs fan or NL Central fan perspective. But he is raking this year with 10 homers, way more than anyone on the Marlins has. Jorge Soler leading the team with 5, so he has double that.
Yeah.
And, I think it's pretty crazy, though.
Dangerous as well, right?
Yeah, but it is pretty crazy that Cabrera got the 12 strikeouts because, with all the base runners he gave up, with all those walks, and, he gave up 3 hits, which isn't bad at all. But it felt like he wasn't doing that good. And then I saw the final line, or at least towards the end of the game, I was looking at his stats, and I'm like, wow, he actually has that many strikeouts. And it's the first time in his career that he's gotten double digits or more than 10 strikeouts in a game. A huge stepping stone for Edward Cabrera. And again, he continues to show Marlins fans that if he had better command, he would be an incredible pitcher.
Definitely. I do wonder. It's funny, right? He comes alive when runners are actually on base. And that's an interest. Eddie was sitting there watching him and thinking, just throw strikes, just trust your stuff. Like, kind of a bit like the message to Jesus Luzardo when he joined the Marlins. It was like, listen, your stuff plays, trust it. And it's almost like when there's runners on base, Eddie thinks, okay, I haven't got anywhere to walk them to now. It's go zone in the strike zone. So I'm really intrigued to see the way that Eddie's season progresses. The main thing thus far, we're a month into the year, no injury issues for Edward Cabrera. For me, he's always been once he gets a little taste of stuff, there's these niggles that start to occur for him, a little knee issue or an ankle, something. But thus far, a month through, the walks have been a touch concerning, but overall, the stuff plays and the health is also holding firm as well, which is encouraging to see. Want to talk about the bullpen as well, because the bullpen was asked to hold on. In the end, yesterday, it was literally holding on. Tanner Scott asked to come in to save his second game, which was fun. And actually, Tanner Scott has flashed in that role. The couple of asked to do it. But before we do that, talk about our good friends over at Gametime. They are the sponsor of the show, and they're also one of the main advertisers for this one. First ad of the day. And if you are buying tickets, they shouldn't be stressful. If you're buying tickets for your favorite events, it shouldn't be a stressful thing. And with Gametime, it's fast and easy to buy all the tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They've got killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guaranteed. You can stop stressing over tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Sounds good to me. You can snag tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Yeah, sounds good. We might need those for today's game. Who knows? I mean, it's noon start. That is an interesting time. It's very early. It's almost too early for me in the UK. So that's kind of really testing it. Ryan, though, the bullpen, as we mentioned yesterday, Matt Barnes was brought into leverage. It was a bit of a sticky outing for Nardi and Okert. Okert has looked a touch rusty, to be honest with you. But Nardi just didn't have anything yesterday. It was a real tough outing for Nardi. But Brazoban, sandwiched in between those two guys that struggles. Just talked about Brazoban this year. Like, he's kind of flying under the radar a touch. Not the sexiest name, but it feels like he comes in, he just puts fires out. Really impressive thus far for Brazoban.
Yeah, Oscar Brazoban, he's been a good cleanup man, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
You know, if a guy has inherited 1, 2, or even 3 base runners and the bases are loaded or something like that, he comes in and he really saves the Marlins. And I really like him in that role. You know, if the Marlins bullpen starts to get a little shorthanded with injuries, which we haven't really seen too much. I mean, the only notable guy on the IL right now from the bullpen, now that Okert is back, we kind of swapped Okert with Chagua, but eventually he will come back, hopefully pretty soon. And because he was off to a great start and he looked like a guy who could be a great 7th inning man behind Floro and Puck, or even in the 8th inning role. You know, maybe they would even end up down the line giving him some Sadal opportunities if, you know, Puck wasn't available or anything like that. But yeah, I think Brazoban's going to get his chance to show what he can do in really high leverage situations, because he's been middle relief so far, but he's been really good at what he's been doing and where he's been put into. So I'm very impressed with Brazoban. And even though the Marlins bullpen, you know, you've been saying this line a lot, especially with AJ Puck, they've been nails this season. But, you know, some guys aren't going to have their best outing. And today, Nardi and Okert did not have their best stuff. They didn't have their best appearances. And Brazoban was able to kind of clean it up and avoid the Marlins from blowing that 5-0 lead at one point. They were up by 4 runs for most of the game, too.
Yeah, for sure. Braz really kind of dug in there with those 2 innings. Like, it was essential, because obviously Nardi came in and didn't get an out, Nardi. So everything went wonky for him. Bellinger with the bomb against him, which was a huge bomb as well. And then Okert really struggled as well. Matt Barnes came in, kind of tidied that up a touch. And then it was over to Tanner Scott. And listen, Tanner Scott, the 2 appearances, both in save situations this year, for me, have been by far his best outings. So Tanner Scott, you know, all of a sudden when the heat comes on for him, a bit like Eddie Cabrera when there's runners on base, this year, Tanner Scott in the 9th, the highest of highest leverage spots, he's coming alive. But it's so important for the Marlins to have, you know, playing in these like tight games, you know, 1-run games. It's essential that they have other guys they can lean on apart from AJ Puck and Dylan Floro. It looks like Tanner Scott's going to be that 3rd guy right now, particularly, you know, it's kind of matchup based, obviously, him being a lefty, but yesterday. And how nervous were you as well with Tanner Scott walking out with that save opportunity?
Yeah, well, I mean, I got nervous because, you know, I'm like, oh my gosh, here we go again. Because usually when Tanner Scott comes in, he gives my dad and I a heart attack. And especially what gives us a heart attack is when he comes into the game and he immediately throws 2 or 3 balls and then ends up walking the first hitter.
Yep.
And when they have that leadoff man on with no outs, that is like the scariest thing. But Tanner Scott came into the game and he immediately got an out. Then he gave up a hit, so there was 1-on-1 out. Seiya Suzuki got a single. And then he struck out 2 in a row to end the game. And Scott, the numbers haven't been there, which surprisingly, I didn't even realize that. The numbers are at 5.73. That's his ERA this season in 11 games. So it hasn't been great statistically, but I feel like in some of the higher leverage situations for Tanner Scott, he's been good, which is why I probably don't realize that his numbers are not good because I might have turned off the game when he's pitching in those, when he's eating up innings. I might have not even noticed that, but when it matters, I think he's been good this season. He had one bad outing that I really remember from opening weekend. But again, Tanner Scott, we've always known he has great stuff. He throws pretty fast, but the problem is, can he throw strikes? He's pretty much the relief pitching version of Edward Cabrera. And this year he's been better at throwing strikes consistently, and he's been much improved, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know what is much improved, as we talked about, and I've talked about, and everyone's talking about, the bullpen in general as a whole is better. But I think the key difference for me looking at it is you go back to last year, Floro was hurt starting, going into the year. They had no guys with any closing experience ever. And so, Tony Bender was kind of thrust into the role. So you got Puck that's had experience, Floro, Tanner Scott opportunities last year, plus Matt Barnes. They've got 4 guys that have been the closer for a period with their club. And that, for me, is the difference in the highest leverage spots. This pen can deliver no matter who's going. And so that's the beauty of this pen and why it's so better. A 9-0 in 1-run games, Ryan. I mean, this is insane. This is legendary from the Marlins, right?
Yeah, the Marlins are currently the only team to be undefeated in 1-run games, and this is something that you could not expect. If I was to tell you during the middle of last season, down the stretch, let's say it was during when we were probably at our lowest point, I'd say right after the All-Star break, we were losing a ton of games and the whole squad was banged up and we were calling up a ton of random relievers twice a week who nobody knew, just calling them up and giving them a chance. But if I was to tell you at that time that the Marlins would be 9-0 in 1-run games during the first month of the next season, you would not believe me. You would 100% not believe me, but that's been the case. The Marlins are surprising everyone. I think this should be talked about on a national level, but instead of people being impressed by the Marlins winning 9 1-run games and not losing any of them, more people who don't follow the Marlins closely, like some of my friends on Twitter who are fans of other teams, they're like, oh, the Marlins have won all these 1-run games. This is not sustainable. Their run differential is terrible. But the Marlins are starting to make people think that maybe it is sustainable. Maybe the bullpen will continue to impress and lock down teams when they're only up by 1 run or come behind and end up winning by 1 run and close it out.
Yeah. I think that's been what you mentioned there, and we're going to segue into the offense shortly. But that's been the other hallmark of this year thus far, is like the offense is never dead. Like they do come alive in the back end of games, and there's been multiple times where they've come from behind, taken the lead, and then they hand it over to the pen, one of the closers, and they can make it happen. So let's talk about the offense after the next ad. There's tons to get into, mate, because overall, Jazz Chisholm Jr. certainly is really starting to heat up. Luis Arias continues to be an absolute stud at the top of that order, in the middle of the order as well. Plus, also, we're seeing some green shoots of recovery as well from Jesus Sanchez. So it's looking impressive. We'll dig into those guys. But before we do that, it's time to let you know about our good friends over at Ultimate Baseball GM. Yes, sir. Let's get these graphics up as well. I mean, it'd be rude not to. There's a QR code as well for those that are watching. And we've been talking about this one for a while now, guys. It's the coolest game I played in a long time. And I've always thought I could be a Major League GM. And as it turns out, I'm not that good at it, based on this game anyway. The game allows you to manage every strategic aspect of a franchise, playing through seasons and leading a franchise and fans to glory. In the simulation, you're responsible for hiring the right coaches and staff, managing team finance, managing all those personalities in the clubhouse, and navigating your franchise through free agency, all the ups and downs of a season. All of this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Baseball GM is completely free. It is a free game, unbelievable scenes, and it's playable offline. So you can play on the go as you want, when you want to. Locked On Marlins listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out. Download the game. Just visit probaseballgm.com. Scan the code on the screen or look it up on the app stores. That's probaseballgm.com. Ultimate Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. All right. You need to get that one downloaded, Ryan. You'll enjoy that game for sure.
Yeah, I just downloaded it. I'm starting it right now.
There we go. Yes, sir. Use the promo code as well. Don't forget that. Get your free boost. Talking about the offense, mate, for me, as you know, I've been heavily tracking Jazz Chisholm Jr.'s performance this year. I had high projections for him, and I must see he's transitioned back up to the leadoff spot. I know he's sitting in the 6 hole today because the lefty's going, but for me, Jazz came on Twitter, a week into the year. Don't panic. Don't panic, he said. It's only game 8. Come back to me after 30 or 40. In that period, Jazz has really heated up. Power is still there, but it's defense. It is also, he's dropping bunts. Jazz Chisholm Jr. really starting to look like a leadoff hitter there now. How impressed have you been with him?
Yeah, I mean, it's been incredible, and it's only been incredible for the past week. He was off to a slow start, maybe the past week and a half now. He's been playing a lot better. And, I think I knew it was going to take some time. I was one of those guys who was not doubting him as much as some other fans were about center field. I got worried during spring training, but for the most part, I was telling my friends who were surprised. They're like, why are the Marlins switching him to center field? Who are not Marlins fans. They're fans of some big market teams like a Yankees fan, a Braves fan. Yeah. And I told them he'll be okay. And they're like, no, why are they switching him? He should be playing his natural. He should be playing his natural position over at second base. And I knew he would be just fine. And it would take some time. But now he's developed into a great center fielder and one of the best in the National League right now, I think. Yeah. And he has not made a bad play since the beginning of the season from what I've seen. Maybe one little mistake here and there. But other than that, he's been incredible. And now that he's pretty adjusted to center field, his main focus is now hitting, and he's turning it on with the bats. Right now, his batting average is now at actually 252. Ooh. It's gone up. And 5 homers. And the OPS plus is now at 103, which is just 3 above average. But with that slow start, it's looking better for Jazz, and it'll only go up from here.
Yeah, for sure. 3-hit day yesterday for Jazz. At one point, he was 3 for 3 with a hit by pitch as well, I believe. Yeah. So big day for Jazz. He's really heating up. Just talk to me about the center field situation, because I do think it's going to be an interesting storyline as we go through the year. I think what we have seen and what our eyeballs are telling us and what all the statistics are telling us is Jazz can play center field. He's making it work and he's looking good out there. The question is midterm, i.e. as you look into next year and beyond, is this going to be Jazz's position? Is he going to transition fully into a center fielder now for a good portion of his career? What's your take on that? Maybe too early to say, and it may do, but for me, he's out there looking like a stud center fielder, and actually, let's just stick with it.
Yeah, I think there's no reason not to stick with it. I mean, he hasn't played second base in a while. He didn't play any spring training games at second base. I don't even think he played second base in any simulated games on the backfields in spring training as well. And, at the very beginning of the season, we saw him getting some practice in over at the middle infield before the game. And then he started, after that, he kind of started to really settle in center field. But, yeah, I think Jazz should be our center fielder for years to come, because now that you've already developed him into a good center fielder, he's gotten so much time out there, there's no reason to stop this. And at this point, there's not a ton of better options than Jazz Chisholm that are clearly better to get defensively. I mean, Ramon Laureano will always be an afterthought, as he's been rumored to go to the Marlins for, the past couple of years now, and it's just never happened. He's still over there in Oakland. He still has a incredible arm. He probably has the best arm out of any center fielder, but Jazz is not too far behind him because he makes incredible catches and he gets an incredible jump on some balls.
Yeah, he really does. Really does. He's really settled in there at center field, which has been interesting and great to see, obviously. Let's talk about Jesus Sanchez, because Jesus as well, multi-hit day in there as well. The pressure's on Jesus, we know, right? Because it's been a slow start for him. It's been a tough 2022. But for me, Jesus, and he hit a huge home run as well the other day in one of the previous games in the series. So Jesus Sanchez, he's the stick that the Marlins have needed, right? This lefty power stick. And it's been encouraging what I've seen. Where's your head, Jesus Sanchez more?
Yeah, I mean, Jesus Sanchez, he's been hitting better, and he was off to a terrible start with the batting average at one point, I think, was at below 150. He's gotten it up now. It's at 214. Obviously, that was in a small sample size because they didn't really give him a ton of at-bats at the beginning of the season, and now they're starting to give him his at-bats to show what he's got because he is in consideration to get DFA'd. And for the last week, he's been playing well. He has an on-base streak right now. I believe he's reached base safely for the past 5 games.
There we
And
go.
yeah, and now his numbers are just below average instead of horrible. And it could at some point in the very near future, get to average and then even above average if he keeps playing like this. Now he has some motivation because he knows that the Marlins are close to getting rid of him. So he wants to tell the Marlins, no, that's not going to happen. And I know pretty soon in this podcast, before we wrap it up, we're probably going to talk about who will come back when Joey Wendell, who will get sent down once Joey Wendell comes back, because people thought it might be Jesus Sanchez, but now he might have saved himself in the past 5 games. And it all started with that mammoth home run in Atlanta. And that the morning before that game, I was reading an article about how bad he was by fish stripes by Eli Sussman and his members. And then he hit that crazy homer. So maybe he got some motivation. Maybe he read that article himself with some translation. I don't know.
That's Jesus Sanchez in a nutshell, though, right? Where from time to time, he'll just send one and you'll be like, wow, there it is. It's in there, but his game needs to be much more well-rounded than that. I think that's the point for Jesus. Like, it just can't be these wild hacks and he hits and connects one out of 50. But I was, in advance of this show, was thinking Joey Wendell's kind of trending towards being ready to return. The offense has been performing pretty well, I'd say, over the recent times. Garrett Hampson, I'd say, has definitely been a valuable member of this roster. But as I look around, like if we think about what the corresponding move was, Wendell went down, Hampson was recalled. What's your sense at this point? Do you think they send Hampson back down, or do you think they find another way to get Wendell back up on this roster?
Well, I mean, it's going to sting, but I think they don't have a choice but to send Hampson down now that Jesus Sanchez has saved himself. You have to kind of give him a little bit of a chance. You can't just DFA him once he starts to get hot.
No.
And obviously, Avi, they're not ready to DFA him yet. If they do at one point, that's kind of quieted down this past week.
Not in the lineup today. Did you see 2 games in a row, Avi not in the lineup, obviously a lefty going. So curious decision with Hampson playing right field, I thought, today.
Yeah, that's interesting, and that's kind of weird, but I don't think they're going to get rid of Avi just yet. Maybe they will surprise us, and they will, but it would be a huge surprise if they do, because we know the Marlins have been pretty cautious with Avi, and they've given him the chance. They've given him a fair chance to show what he's got and what he's able to do, but you don't want to be too aggressive to get rid of him with that huge contract. But yeah, I think there's no other option than Garrett Hampson. And the worst hitters now that some guys are starting to heat up, I think the worst hitters on this team this season have been Nick Fortes, who has just been has not been doing anything offensively. If we look at his numbers, he's hitting 188 with 1 home run, just 9 hits. And the OPS plus is at a horrible 39.
Yep.
And then Jacob Stallings has not been any better than Nick Fortes. He is hitting 136, so he's been the worst hitter. Only 6 hits and way more at-bats than Nick Fortes. So, yeah, he's been way worse than Fortes and a 20 OPS plus. But you can't get rid of those guys, obviously, because they are pretty valuable defensively. They are pretty good defensive catchers, and Stallings has that great relationship with Sandy being his personal catcher. And Fortes, he's still young. He's still just off to a bad start. Maybe he could get it going.
Yeah, I must say, just on Jacob Stallings, I thought yesterday, the Saturday game, it was one of the best performances I've seen behind the plate from Jacob Stallings in all of his time with the Marlins. There was so much pressure on, and the bullpen guys were really, really struggling, as was Eddie Cabrera as well with his command. But he was asked to do so much yesterday defensively. He must have used that chest protector about 55 times to block down balls. So Stallings, I'm okay with the catching spot not being, the best offensively. I'd like to see Nick Fortes's numbers tick up, but overall, I think it's, defense first in that spot. But for me, it's been, we'll finish up here because we're running pretty long, but it's there's tons to get into. For me, it's been curious to see the flip side of De La Cruz, where he had this real hot streak, was showing signs of De La Cruz from September. And then in the last couple of games, it's been, ice cold from De La Cruz. He slides all the way down the order today. I think he's hitting maybe in the 8th. De La Cruz, he's always been streaky, and I think this is just part of his makeup, right?
Yeah, I mean, DLC and Jorge Soler have not been good. Recently, I just saw a tweet about Jorge Soler's struggles in the past 10 games. And yesterday I was researching for my article to recap the game yesterday on Substack. You can go check that out. My Substack is ryanschlesinger.com/substack.com. And Jorge Soler in his last 10 games, a 171 batting average, a 42 WRC plus. So after getting off to a hot start and getting clutch hits, he has not been good, and he left 7 guys on base yesterday. And same with De La Cruz. He left 7 men on in the game yesterday. Hopefully, this is just a little cold stretch, and hopefully this doesn't turn into a huge slump.
Yeah, I'm with you. I get the feeling, I think today's a really good example where they're not sure what's happening with Avi. I'm wondering if there's some sort of issue with Avi in terms of injury, because it's weird to see Garrett Hampson out there in right field after Avi didn't play yesterday either. So I'm wondering about that. Jorge Soler has obviously played some right field this year. He then hasn't slid out to right field, so Hampson has. I'm wondering if Soler is already being bothered with this back, this reoccurring back issue that, I heard it earlier in the year, even on his hot streak, they were talking about Soler's back already starting to feel that. I am wondering if this situation is something that we all need to keep an eye on, really, as it maybe deteriorates. Ideally, Soler would be playing out in right field today. He isn't. Hampson's out there. I have no idea where Avi Garcia is. So I think there's a few kind of guys a touch banged up here. But again, it points to the versatility of Garrett Hampson, the value that brings. He really is John Birdie 2.0. He's been hitting okay. Big double yesterday in yesterday's game. So some decisions to make here for the Marlins overall, but we'd love to see Soler pick it back up. De La Cruz, as we know, can be streaky, but overall, one final one. The Braves are coming to Miami this week. They have been heavily interrupted this weekend. Basically, it's been raining nonstop in New York. The Braves are coming into town, 3-game set. I think it would be, a real confidence boost for this Marlins team if they could actually win that series at home against the Braves after what was, in effect, a bit of a beatdown on the road in Atlanta. But how do you see that series going overall?
Yeah, well, on Monday, the Marlins have an off day, and the Braves will be in Queens to play the Mets in a doubleheader. Yeah. So we know the Braves are going to come in late that night, and they're going to be tired after a doubleheader, and they're going to have to play the Marlins the next day at 6:40 Eastern time. It'll be Sandy Alcantara against Bryce Elder. That's a matchup that, the Marlins should win. Bryce Elder has good numbers, but, he's hittable. And if Sandy has his good stuff, which you hope, or at least you hope every outing he has his A+ stuff, but at minimum, you hope he has at least his A- stuff to keep the Marlins in the game. And, I have confidence in Sandy. He's still a great pitcher. He's still our ace. He's still the reigning Cy Young. And then Wednesday, it's going to be Kyle Wright against to be determined. Kyle Wright does not have good numbers this season. That's a winnable game for us.
Should be Jesus Lozado, I think, in the second game.
Yeah, and then it'll be Max Fried, who has a 0.45 ERA this season. He's been really good. He's the Braves' best guy in that rotation, and he's been the leader of that rotation for the past few years, along with the veteran, Charlie Morton, and now Spencer Strider coming into that leader role now as he develops. He's probably now their best pitcher skill-wise in that rotation. And, Fried will face the Marlins. This is a series, I think the Marlins, at best, they could win 2 of 3. You just hope not to get swept, though.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be an interesting series. I do think the rain situation has helped the Marlins a touch. I think if they'd have played on schedule, Spencer Strider would have been pitching against the Marlins, but he's been pushed back, I think. So the Marlins missed Strider. We saw Strider, and boy, oh boy, it was mighty impressive stuff from him. We are bang out of time, though. Ryan, thanks so much for joining me on today's Locked On Marlins. Let everyone know, for the people that are listening and aren't watching and have the graphics to help them, where they can follow you on Twitter and all the other content that you're doing at this point.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at RYAN for Ryan, and then at SCHLESINGE9, Ryan Schlesinger, but instead of I know I made it a weird username because that was like the automated username when I made my account 2 years ago, but it's Ryan Schlesinger, and then replace the R at the end with a 9, and then you can also check me out on Substack, and you can check me out on YouTube, SoFlo Sports. I stream some Marlins games, I do some podcast talk shows, and yeah, thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Peter, for having me on.
Let's go fish. All right, guys. Well, thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. This should be your first listen. This podcast is out early doors, but you may watch the game first and then listen to the podcast. If you do into this, with the Marlins having made their first sweep of the season, all eyes on Brian Hoeing. Can he make it happen for the Marlins? And going into the off day, Atlanta coming into town off the back of that doubleheader, the Marlins should be hot favorites for that series at home. I'll see you tomorrow.